This is a dramatized story inspired by real debt situations. For educational and entertainment purposes only. Not legal or financial advice.
Section 1. Hook 000130. I was 42 years old, bringing home $52,000 a year as a high school teacher, and I owed $73,000 in student loans. The math had never worked. Not once. Not for 15 years. At 42, I had a mortgage, 2 kids, a car payment, and a debt that had followed me since I was 24 years old. A debt I thought I'd pay off in 10 years. I was wrong. What happened next? The phone call, the decision, the number I saw on my credit report 6 months later. I'm going to tell you all of it. Because if you're sitting there right now thinking, this is just my life now, I need you to hear what I found out. Section 2. Reality 034 Zalgren. My name is Marcus. I teach 10th grade English at a public high school outside Columbus, Ohio. I've been teaching for 16 years. I love my job. I'm good at it. My students win state writing competitions. Parents send me thank you notes. None of that pays my student loans. Here's what my financial life looked like on a Tuesday afternoon in February 3 years ago when I finally sat down and wrote every number on a single piece of paper. Federal student loans, $61,400. That was a bachelor's in English education from Ohio State and a master's degree I got because the district said it would bump my salary. It bumped it $3,200 a year. The master's degree alone cost me $28,000. Credit card debt, $9,800. 2 cards. One was supposed to be for emergencies. It was full of emergencies. The transmission on my 2016 Chevy Equinox, the emergency room visit when my daughter broke her wrist, the summer we had to replace the water heater and the furnace in the same month. Car loan, $6,200 remaining. Mortgage, $187,000 left on a house I bought in 2014 with my wife, Diane. Total consumer debt, not counting the mortgage, $77,400. My take-home pay after taxes, health insurance, and my pension contribution, $3,010 a month. My monthly minimum payments, student loans, $612. Credit cards, $290. Car, $3,040. Mortgage, $104. That's $2,347 a month before groceries, utilities, gas, phone, kids' activities, or any single unexpected expense. I had $1,263 left each month to feed and run a family of 4. For years, I told myself we were fine. We weren't fine. We were one car breakdown away from not being fine on paper. We'd been not fine in reality for years. I just hadn't looked directly at it. Diane worked part-time as a dental hygienist 3 days a week, bringing in about $1,900 a month. We needed that money. She thought it was helping us get ahead. It was keeping us from drowning. Our combined household income was $66,000. Our annual debt payments, not counting the mortgage, were over $29,000. That's 44 cents of every dollar we earned going to debt. The number I kept coming back to was $73,000. That student loan balance. I had been paying it for 15 years. When I graduated with my master's in 2009, I owed $58,000. 15 years of payments, I owed more than when I started. That's when something cracked open in my chest. Section 3. Emotional Crisis 4-730. The call started in January. I had missed 2 payments on my private student loan, $280 a month, a loan I took out to cover a gap in my master's funding that my federal loans didn't touch. I'd been juggling, robbing Peter to pay Paul, and in December, I chose the mortgage and the credit card minimum over the private loan. By January, a collection agency had the account. They called at 7:14 in the morning on a Wednesday. I was making my kids' lunches. My daughter Maya, she was 9, she looked up from her cereal and said, "Daddy, your phone keeps ringing." I let it go to voicemail. They called again at 11:30 a.m. during my second period class. I felt my phone buzz in my pocket while I was standing at the whiteboard explaining thesis statements to 23 15-year-olds. They called at 4:45, at 6:20, at 8:10 that night while I was helping my son with his homework. I answered on the 5th call of the day. The voice on the other end was flat, professional, and absolutely relentless. She told me I owed $4,180, including late fees and collection costs. She told me if I didn't make arrangements today, they would pursue all available remedies. I said I'd call back. I didn't call back. Diane didn't know about the private loan. I had never told her it existed. When I consolidated my loans in 2011, I had lumped everything together in my head and just never mentioned the private one. It wasn't a deliberate lie. It was the kind of thing you don't say because saying it makes it real. The night she found out was a Thursday in March. She was sorting through a stack of mail I'd been leaving on the kitchen counter. I had developed a habit of not opening envelopes with certain return addresses. She opened one. It was a formal collections notice, $4,380, urgent, legal action. She walked into the living room where I was watching nothing on television, and she put the letter on the coffee table in front of me without saying a word. I looked at it. I looked at her. She said, "How long?" I said, "A few months." She said, "How much do we actually owe?" "All of it. Tell me the real number." I told her. She sat down on the couch and she didn't say anything for a long time. Then she said, "Marcus, I have been working 3 days a week for 4 years thinking we were building something. Where did it go?" I didn't have an answer. I had interest rates. I had minimum payments. I had 15 years of a loan balance that went up instead of down. But I didn't have an answer. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the dark and did math in my head. If I paid $600 a month on my federal loans at 8% interest, the loan would be paid off in 2031. I would be 51 years old, my son would be starting college, and I'd be starting from zero. I thought about the teachers I knew who had retired. They talked about their pensions like a life raft. I started calculating what my pension would actually be after 30 years of teaching. It wasn't nothing. But it wasn't comfortable either. Not with nothing saved. I had $4,200 in my 403B, 15 years of teaching, and I had $4,200 saved for retirement because every time I tried to contribute more, something else came up. I was 42. I had $4,200 saved for retirement and $73,000 in student loans. I went to the bathroom, ran cold water over my face, and stood there looking in the mirror for a long time. I thought, I did everything right. I got the education. I got the advanced degree. I got the stable government job. I bought the house. I'm a good husband and a good father and a good teacher. And it wasn't enough. None of it had been enough. Section 4. Wrong choices. 7:30-10 Yawen. I want to be honest about the mistakes I made because I see people making the same ones right now, and I wish someone had stopped me. Mistake 1. I refinanced my federal loans. In 2017, a company advertised a refinance rate of 2%, which was lower than my federal rate of 8%. I jumped at it. I refinanced $44,000 of my federal student loans into a private loan at that lower rate. What I didn't understand, what nobody explained to me clearly, is that the moment I did that, I lost access to every federal income-driven repayment plan. I lost access to public service loan forgiveness, which as a public school teacher I had been potentially eligible for. I lost federal protections like deferment and forbearance in case of financial hardship. I traded long-term protection for a lower monthly payment. When COVID hit in 2020 and federal student loan payments were paused, my refinanced private loan kept billing me. No pause, no forbearance, because it was private now. Mistake 2, I used a balance transfer to manage my credit card debt. In 2019, I transferred $7,400 in credit card debt to a card offering 0% APR for 18 months. Smart move in theory. In practice, I didn't pay it down aggressively during those 18 months because I told myself I had time. When the promotional period ended, the rate jumped to 99%. I had paid the balance down to $6,100, but now I was paying nearly 25% interest on $6,100. Mistake 3, I hid the mail. For the better part of a year, I was putting collection notices and past due statements in a drawer in my home office without opening them. My logic, and I use that word loosely, was that if I didn't know exactly how bad it was, I could keep functioning. I could keep going to work and making lunches and coaching my son's soccer team on Saturday mornings. What actually happened is that late fees piled up, accounts moved to collections faster, and my credit score dropped 94 points in 8 months, a FISO score. I had worked hard to build. 711 was down to 617 by the time I started opening the drawer. Mistake 4, I almost rated my 403B. In April, I pulled up my retirement account online and looked at the early withdrawal option. $4,200. If I withdrew it early, I would owe a 10% penalty plus income taxes. I would have received maybe $2,800 after everything. I was going to do it. I had my hand on the mouse. My coworker Linda, who teaches AP history and has seen more than most people, walked into my classroom during lunch that day. And I must have looked like something was wrong because she sat down across from me and said, "What's happening with you?" I told her. Not all of it, but enough. She said, "Do not touch that retirement account. That is the last money you protect. Call a nonprofit credit counselor first. Promise me." I promised her. I almost didn't keep it. But I did. Section 5, Turning Point, 10, Kasse and 12 rounds. I called a nonprofit credit counseling agency on a Friday afternoon in April. I found them through the NFCC, the National Foundation for Credit Counseling. I want to say that clearly because there are a lot of companies out there that call themselves credit counseling and charge you fees up front and make promises they can't keep. The organization I called was a legitimate nonprofit, and the first session was free. The counselor's name was Patricia. She was calm in a way that felt earned, not performed. She asked me to walk her through every debt, every balance, every interest rate, every minimum payment. I read her the list, the same list I had written on that piece of paper in February. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Okay, this is workable. I've seen much worse, and I want you to hear me say that." She explained that I had several paths forward, and none of them were shameful, and all of them required me to understand what I was actually dealing with. She walked me through the difference between debt consolidation, combining multiple debts into a single loan, ideally at a lower interest rate, and a debt management plan, where the agency negotiates with creditors on your behalf to reduce interest rates, and you make one monthly payment to the agency, which distributes it to your creditors. She talked about debt settlement, but she was honest about the risks. It damages your credit score severely, the forgiven amount can be taxable income, and not all creditors will negotiate. She said it's a last resort before bankruptcy, not a first step. Then she brought up what I had been afraid to say out loud: bankruptcy. She explained the difference between Chapter 7 bankruptcy, which discharges most unsecured debt but requires you to pass a means test and may require liquidating certain assets, and Chapter 13 bankruptcy, which sets up a 3 to 5 year repayment plan and lets you keep your assets, including your home. For someone in my situation, homeowner, steady income, primary debt being student loans, Chapter 13 was worth a conversation with a bankruptcy attorney. She said student loans are notoriously difficult to discharge in bankruptcy, but Chapter 13 could protect me from collection actions while I got the rest of my financial life in order. She also mentioned something I hadn't known. As a public school teacher, I should look immediately into whether my remaining federal loans qualified for the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, or PSLF, and whether any income-driven repayment options were still available to me. The refinanced portion of my loan, $44,000, was private. That was the hard part. But my remaining $29,000 in federal loans, those were still eligible. She said, "I want you to consult with a licensed bankruptcy attorney and a student loan specialist before you make any decisions. I can give you referrals, but I need you to understand. You have more options than you think you do." I drove home that night, and I sat in the driveway for 10 minutes before going inside. For the first time in 3 years, I didn't feel like I was running from something. I felt like I was turning around to face it. Section 6. Educational Information, 12 SN 1315. I want to be clear. I'm not a financial advisor, and I'm not a lawyer. What I'm sharing is my experience. Before you make any decision about bankruptcy, debt consolidation, debt settlement, or any other debt relief option, you need to consult a licensed professional. A bankruptcy attorney, a nonprofit credit counselor, or a certified financial planner. But here's what I learned that I wish I had understood years earlier, on student loans specifically. If you have federal student loans and work for a government or nonprofit employer, including public schools, look into public service loan forgiveness. It's not automatic, and the paperwork requirements are strict, but after 120 qualifying payments on an income-driven repayment plan, the remaining balance can be forgiven tax-free. A lot of teachers don't know they qualify. I almost missed it entirely because of that refinance. On bankruptcy, Chapter 7 can clear unsecured debts like credit cards relatively quickly, typically 3 to 6 months, but it stays on your credit report for 10 years, and you must pass a means test. Chapter 13 takes longer, 3 to 5 years, but it lets you keep your home and creates a structured repayment plan. Your FICO score will take a hit with either option, but it's not permanent. Credit scores can rebuild. Financial paralysis is far more dangerous long-term. On credit counseling, use nonprofit agencies affiliated with the NFCC or FCAA. Avoid any company that asks for large upfront fees or promises to settle your debt for pennies on the dollar without explaining the tax and credit consequences. On your FICO score, payment history is 35% of your score. The best thing you can do, even before you've solved the big debt problem, is stop missing payments on your current accounts. Even one on-time payment starts rebuilding, and on that 403B, I almost emptied. Protect your retirement account. Early withdrawal penalties and taxes can cost you 30 to 40 cents on every dollar. It's almost never the right first move. Section 7. Resolution 13, 15, 14, 30. I want to be honest with you about where I am now, because this isn't a story with a perfect ending. It's a story about finding the floor and realizing the floor is solid enough to stand on. After working with the nonprofit credit counselor and consulting with a bankruptcy attorney, Diane and I decided not to file for bankruptcy. Our situation didn't require it. What we did instead, I enrolled my remaining $29,000 in federal loans in an income-driven repayment plan, the SAVE plan, which capped my payments based on my income. My monthly federal loan payment dropped from $612 to $188 a month. I also submitted my employment certification forms for PSLF. I had 12 years of qualifying payments already on record. I needed 120. I was closer than I thought. For the private loan and the credit card debt, we enrolled in a debt management plan through the nonprofit agency. They negotiated my credit card interest rates down from 99% to 9%. I now make one payment a month to the agency. It gets distributed to my creditors automatically. We didn't fix everything. The private student loan is still there. The mortgage is still there. We still have months where Diane and I sit at the kitchen table and the numbers feel tight. But here's what changed. The collection calls stopped. The drawer in my home office is empty. My FICO score, which had dropped to 617, is back above 680 and still climbing. And most importantly, I stopped lying. To Diane, to myself, about what we owed and what it meant and what it would take. Maya asked me recently why I seemed less tired than I used to. I told her I'd been getting better sleep. That was true, but it wasn't the whole truth. The whole truth is that I stopped carrying the debt alone. I stopped pretending the number on the paper wasn't real. I stopped waiting for something to rescue me and started learning the options that were already there. If you're 38 or 44 or 47 and you've got a number you're afraid to write it down. Call a nonprofit credit counselor. Ask about PSLF if you work in public service. Talk to a bankruptcy attorney before you assume bankruptcy is off the table. The options are more than you've been told. You're not too far gone. I promise you, you're not too far gone. Section 8, CTA 1430-1450. Get the free debt checklist in the description. It covers student loan repayment options, how to find a legitimate nonprofit credit counselor, what to ask a bankruptcy attorney in your first consultation, and how to start rebuilding your FITIO score this week. Link below. And if this story sounded familiar, subscribe, because next week we're going into what really happens when you apply for PSLF and they say your payments don't qualify. That one gets real.